Okay, podcast 4 on this series of linked podcasts about the first stage of the German Revolution. What we saw in the last podcast was that that there was a call by the workers of Berlin to go on strike, massive protest against the war. This has happened previously, remember, in January 1918, and on that particular occasion the German army had put the strike down. However, the situation is now much more volatile, not least because, of course, there are lots and lots of workers' Soviets. And we saw in the previous podcast how reluctantly Abdication and Scheidemann, the leader of the majority socialists, agreed to support that particular strike. Why reluctantly? Okay, well, the strikes were supposed to be non-political, but this particular strike was moving into the realm of politics because it was demanding the abdication of the Kaiser. Now remember, we said Abdication and Scheidemann were first and foremost believers in constitutional change. They were not anti-monarchist. They all along had supported the Kaiser, very loyal, but they were frustrated because the Kaiser was not prepared to change the way in which he ran the country. And of course we saw in October that at long last the Kaiser had announced a willingness to change the constitution. But in a sense, events on the streets are now outrunning what's happening in the corridors of power. And the Kaiser's proclamation of October, the previous month, that he was prepared to reform the constitution, remember, was too little too late. The mood on the streets now was that the Kaiser should abdicate. Now again, that itself is not necessarily a revolutionary act. The Kaiser could abdicate, his son could become the new Kaiser. So it's not necessarily abolishing the monarchy, it's just simply abdicating the monarch, which is a subtle difference. So Abdication and Scheidemann did agree to support the calls of the workers for the Kaiser to abdicate. So they made it clear to Prince Max, who was the Chancellor, that a new democratic government had to be accountable to Parliament. It needed to be called at once. Okay, there needed to be an immediate change. But they made it very clear that they were not assuming power on behalf of the Soviets. Okay, so this was not a revolutionary act, but it was a constitutional course of action. Abdication and Scheidemann were always very keen to emphasise that the demands we're making here for political change are not revolutionary. So Prince Max responded to the call and he announced the Kaiser's abdication, and he handed power over to Abdication. Okay, so Prince Max basically gave over government from himself as the Chancellor. He stepped down and he handed power to Abdication, and Abdication took control of the government provisionally. Okay, so there has now been a significant shift in power. Realising that that even now his own ministers and even his own generals and soldiers are abandoning him, the Kaiser agreed to abdicate, and he put up no resistance at all. So the Kaiser went in exile to Holland. So effectively now a provisional government has been formed, led by Abdication, that is now accountable to the Reichstag. Okay, and the Kaiser has stepped down. Now, that does not mean at this particular stage that Germany has become a republic. By no means. Abdication, in his own mind, simply is feeling, I am taking over the reins of power temporarily. There needs to be a new election that will form a one-off parliament, what we call a constituent assembly, that will decide on what future form Germany will take. Will it continue to be a monarchy with a different monarch, or will it be a republic, in other words, a country in which there is an elected head of state rather than a monarch? So that was the situation by the 9th of November. That's the end of this podcast. Thank you.